Thank you for joining us on our webinar on remote monitoring and remote access. We will take about a minute, minute and a half just to let people filter in, and then we will start the show. If anybody has some card tricks they want to do while we're waiting. It's just sitting here and you're like, do. Anybody who's joined in the past 30 seconds, we're just giving it a minute for people to filter in before we officially start. So just hang in there. So I'm counting in my head. I should have used the stopwatch.
I think we can get started now.
All right, that's good enough. Again, thank you to everyone for joining us for this remote monitoring and remote access webinar. I'm Philip Rosen. I am the COO and Director of ICA Engineering. I have with me here Joseph Stevenson, the President of ICA Engineering. You can see Joe White waving there. We have Trevor Lang, Field Applications Engineer with HMS. We have William Nieves. I probably with Turtle and Hughes. He is the Industrial Networks Engineering and BDM. And we have David Stick, the Vice President of Pride Solvents. So at this point, Joe, do you want to pick it up, or I can say a few words first? It's up to you.
Well, I can pick it up from here, Philip. So basically what we want to start here is we wanted to give a guide to remote access and remote support. Something that it's been important for a while. It's been growing, but in the era of COVID became, a much bigger issue in the last year or so. So basically the idea is that giving outside integrators like ICA Engineering access to your automation systems remotely, and for a few different reasons. One is for maintenance, and backup and things like that. But it became very important last year during COVID because in a lot of sites they were trying to keep the number of people on site to a minimum. So if you have any sort of automation issues that required attention, if there was a way to do that without having additional people go on site, this would definitely be beneficial in order to try to keep the spread of the disease down. So we found that we got a few additional clients that came on. Now, one of the things we will also be talking about this is security, because one of the big questions that comes up for people whenever you talk about remote access is there's concerns about security. And as we saw recently with the pipeline issue, that's certainly a valid concern. So these kind of things go hand in hand. First, we want to throw over to Trevor Lang, though. Trevor can talk a bit about remote access and the different types of methods, both software and hardware. HMS represents as a company that produces hardware for firewalls and remote access. Trevor?
Thanks, Joe. So at HMS, we have a family of products we label under a brand we call E1. So E1 is a brand of remote access solutions that not only include hardware, but also cloud-based infrastructure and software. So there's a whole suite of tools that you would use to set up a secure and reliable and highly available remote access solution. So on a hardware side, we offer a gateway. We call it a remote access gateway that basically gets installed on whatever machine, whatever system that you want to have the ability to access remotely. That system gets installed and connected to the machine's network or the devices on the machine through typically Ethernet, but we can also do it through old-fashioned serial connections as well if necessary. And once that's installed on the machine, it gets connected to a private account. So you create an account on our network, cloud-based network infrastructure that we call Talk2M. So Talk2M is just a network of servers that are scattered throughout the globe that manage the connections between devices on a machine and people who need to access those machines. And so this solution is basically highly available because we have a lot of redundancy built in. If we ever have an issue with a server in our cloud infrastructure, we have redundancy built in so that your traffic can go through a different type of connection. And then as a user, you can access your account with your own private username, password, and you can even set up dual factor authentication for security purposes. You can make sure you have to authorize your connection through a phone. And then as a user, you would create an end-to-end VPN connection between yourself, whatever device you're using, whether it be a laptop or a tablet, phone, etc. You make a VPN tunnel between yourself and that machine. And one of the things that's nice about that type of connection is you can run any configuration software, programming tools, anything that is necessary to connect with the devices on the machine. And it's all transparent to that software. The software thinks it's hardwired into the machine, but it's actually traveling through a encrypted secure tunnel called VPN. And once that connection's made, then you can do all the programming you need, all the updates, you can do monitoring, you can access HMIs on the screen, HMI screens on your machine. So there's a lot of built-in functionality that you can utilize in the process of servicing and maintaining remote equipment.
Thank you. Now, just to give everybody in the audience an idea, we have multiple clients that are using these kind of devices. We used to use some other devices, but we've switched over to the E1s. We find them very reliable, easy to set up, and very secure. So now we have multiple clients, and it allows us to get online with the hardware, as Trevor said, and just from our desk. We don't have to drive out, so it saves time getting out to site. And again, we in times of the disease, we cut down on contact. But and the nice thing is really we could access from anywhere. Now that also does bring up the issue again of security, because one of the big concerns whenever we suggest these to people is there's a perception that this is going to create an additional vulnerability to the site. It turns out that's not really the case, because in most cases, these devices are set up using your existing office network to connect out to the outside world. So that is already a vulnerability. If you have automation assets on that network, now you have some additional potential issues. So the E1s, in addition to allowing remote access, they also serve as a router. So what it allows us to do then is to put the automation assets on a separate network segment where they're isolated from the office network. We've had in the past clients that didn't have these, and they kept having issues where on in-house office equipment was going on in the network and knocking off automation assets, which not only can be troubling, depending on what piece of equipment it is, it could be dangerous. If you knock off some remote IO, that could be dangerous. So this allows some separation between the automation network and the office network, but we still have the ability for people who need that data, perhaps for a historian or something like that, so that can still be presented using like a NAT table. So there's ways to do that. But the other thing is that as far as security goes, and I'm going to have William talk about security in detail, but we've had a number of clients who have been hit in their office network with denial of service ransom attacks, and but in all the instances where we've had these VPN devices, none of the automation assets were affected. So the operations were not held up. They had problems in their offices, but none of their automation systems were affected because of the security that's built into the E1s. So if anything, this actually is going to make you more secure because you're now providing this hardware firewall. So William, you want to talk more about security, some of the security issues?
Yes, thank you, Joseph. Trevor, thank you also, because internal Huge E1 has been fundamental in many projects and many applications So we have quite experience using this product with good benefits for us. Now, something that is very interesting when you think about security is, okay, it doesn't matter if I have an advanced piece of software or an advanced piece of hardware. The case is default passwords. That's a typical issue that we see in the OT networks more than in IT networks. The capacity of make modification over the hardware and put something that is more or is stronger. And what is the problem when you are following default configuration for some devices? Well, you may hear about these two programs, Google Docs and Shodan. Very, very aggressive scanning tools that can identify assets that are connected to the network everywhere. And this is accessible to anyone out there. So think about it. Right now, we have a $70 million ransom attack that is covering over a dozen countries and over 1,500 companies happening right now. Added to what we saw in the Colonial Pipeline, what we saw in Florida, what we see with the GBS system. So the guys are acting, and sometimes we, the guys that are trying to fight back, we are behind the activities that they're doing. You may ask, what kind of tools they use? How is that possible that even with a very aggressive and powerful pieces of software and hardware protecting our network, they're able to go through? Well, this is a very interesting list of the hacking tools for 2021. All this is free, all this is accessible, and guys everywhere are getting closer and closer to us using tools like this ones. You may hear about also other places like this one, Thor, the dark web. So that's when you have such a amount of different programs and tools to scan the network, then you realize how I can protect my network. E1 is doing an extraordinary effort doing it. And one of the reasons has to deal with this. And it's something that talking about remote connectivity or security always has to put it in front. Standards, the IEC 62443 for OT networks. If anyone in this call is interested to know where I can start, how I can understand better about cybersecurity and remote access, this is a good standards to go for it. E1 has one very important confirmance about one of these standards that is the IAC 62443 part 4-1 that is telling us about the life cycle of the product, patches, and everything else. In Rockwell, the extension of the services is even further. And one of the things that we can keep talking is what kind of solutions I can have protecting our networks with all these tools that I showed you before. I don't know if all this clarify a little bit more about cybersecurity.
Oh, okay. Thank you, William. Just looking at some of the other things here.
Actually, there's something I just interject really quick because it follows from what William was saying. On the other side of this, people don't realize just how easy it is to get this type of ransomware software. And I actually am doing a piece for the ISA on this. As an experiment, I went online and searched, and I'm more experienced than others in doing, with computer technology, but it took me probably about 45 minutes to get to the point where I could have made a purchase on one. Yes. And which is startling, which means anybody can really start up with just basic search knowledge at that point and get access to this software. I mean, that's like the pipeline attack. I believe that one, that the shutdown was because the people who actually did it, they were novices. They didn't know what they were doing. So they unintentionally did that shutdown, is my understanding. So you don't not only have a danger from hackers who are skilled, but you have danger from these people who have no skill whatsoever, and they can do an inadvertent damage in the process of trying to use the software.
And something to complement Philip's is, it is the clear difference between IT and OT. And everybody in this meeting is working in this convergence between IT and OT. Dave actually in our pre-meeting was making very interesting example about this. It's so critical because IT people, they have in good faith the best intentions to help us about our networks, but they don't understand how our devices talk. And today we have an issue when we bring unsecure protocols online, like Modbus TCP. Today, everybody should be moving away from Modbus TCP. It's a little bit aggressive, but that's the reality. Ethernet IP is introducing the SIP security as an extra layer of protection. And in some of the questions that I remember is what is there beyond the VPN SSL? So maybe we can talk about this a little bit later.
Okay, good. And, and you bring up a good point, William, about legacy protocols and things like that. One of the things that's difficult for people sometimes when they have an asset, whatever the automation asset is, that's functioning fine, and but you suggest that they want to you want to replace it, and they say, well, but it's working. Why should I replace it now? Well, part of the problem is that legacy products are not as secure as the ones we use today. Then this is developed over many years, and this is part of what happens. Like even with Windows, Microsoft stops supporting the old versions of Windows because it gets too costly for them to try to keep up with all the security updates that they have to do on these old products. Their thing is, at a certain point, you have to come up to the new version, and they're going to keep working on the new products. But if you've got old installations of Windows 7, Windows XP, Windows 2000, or God forbid anything older, these have massive security holes compared to today. They might have been okay in their day, but now they're just not sufficient, and so it really becomes incumbent upon you to try to move up. And actually something Dave can talk to. We just did recently with Dave at Pride Chemicals. Is they had an old server that was running some older software that was not. It was basically running on Windows XP, and it was Server 2003, and this was creating a serious security hole for them. And so we helped them migrate over to a newer platform so they would avoid that big security hole, because obviously everyone's at risk. I don't know if Dave, if you want to talk a little bit about that. You're muted, Dave.
Being in chemical distribution, we're heavily involved with the Homeland Security, and based on that, we had some information that was forwarded to us that we were, you got improvised, and we had a hacking take place. It was pretty serious at the time. So we went through all our structures, and we reviewed a whole bunch of IP addresses with some other authorities, and we had a lot of people from the federal government interested in what was going on. So we finally came to a conclusion. We had to rebuild our entire system, and then we found out, working with Joe, that his part of the system was the least affected out of exactly what happened with this whole event, which was pretty interesting.
Right, and Dave's system is one of the ones that was protected by an E1, and the automation assets that were behind the E1 were unaffected by the denial of service attack. So that's one of the things that gave us extra confidence in the E1s and why we've standardized on them, because because we know that if the hackers could have gotten through, they would have, because they certainly were out to do as much damage as possible. Let me see what else we have here.
I just like to add one more thing. And regarding the remote monitoring, it's become quite an asset, because we're dealing with 350,000 gallons of hazardous flammable storage, and maintenance has become an issue. Some of my technology is purchased out of Nebraska, and now that we have this ability, Joe can come in and he can monitor my radar, he can monitor certain parameters, so on and so forth. Instead of shutting the system down and evacuating the facility and coming on a Saturday and flying people in from over the country, we can do this during lunch with Joe. He can go in and troubleshoot and dissect. We can contact the manufacturer over the phone. Between the three of us, we can get these things resolved timely. Even though even when we have on-site unknown inspections that take place, being the industry we're in, sometimes we have glitches internally communicating to certain things to signal and demonstrate certain safety devices within the plant. Joe has, on one occasion, done that while they were attended Pride, the health department within Long Island, Suffolk County Health Department. And we were able to trigger the tank radar. It simulates an overfill or ground pollution. And Joe was able to do that from New Jersey at that point.
Right.
Which proves that this is something upcoming, at least our corporation.
Right. And to give people some context, for us to drive from where we are in Union, New Jersey, out to Holtzville, where Pride is located, depending on the traffic, it's about a 2-hour drive. So you can imagine, you know, if something critical is going on, for Dave to have to wait and hold up operations for at least 2 hours while somebody gathers all their stuff together and packs up and drives out to Long Island and sets up. So you're really talking 3 hours before any work actually starts, as opposed to someone just, you know, taking their computer, logging into the E1, getting onto the network and having the problem described to us, and we can address it in very short order. And that's something all of our engineers, a few of our, you know, Kyle's connected, Sarah has, Ricky has. So we've all been able to get on and support Pride in a very short period of time from wherever we're at, which is great, because that's the other big part, is that people could literally be anywhere on the world. You know, I and some of our other engineers, I know when we've been on vacation, but it was a system that we had the most knowledge, you know, that particular person had the most knowledge and wasn't near, you know, wasn't in the office or anything, but was still able to support. And in some cases, we have customers who have 24-hour operation, and again, who wants to get up in the middle of the night and take a shower and get dressed and drive some length of time to get to a site. So being able to just jump on very quickly and address the issue is extremely helpful, and saves money, because obviously, you know, travel time costs money, and being out of operation costs money as well. So so they're actually a very good investment from that perspective. The other thing too is to notice, like I said, there's multiple solutions. And again, William, if you want to pick this up, you know, there's hardware solutions and software solutions that kind of go hand in hand. So in our case, so we have the E1s to get access to networks. We can use remote desktop to get to PCs. We also there's some other software that we use that we can also get directly onto PCs, so we can work with them. And then but being able to get onto the client network from our own laptop. So this also saves money from the client, because instead of the client having to have a software installation that's many thousands of dollars on a dedicated PC that's only used in troubleshooting, we have the licenses, and so this way it saves you that, you know, in the old days, anytime you did a PLC installation, you'd sell somebody a computer with some software so that you could you know, service the system. And now that's not necessary with something that we can provide.
Yeah. Something very interesting, and I want to tap in Dave comment, and Joseph actually follow up that one, was what we're seeing today is a hyper connectivity happening everywhere. All our customers, all our users want to see the devices online. And the next level is they want to put data out there in the cloud. So back in the day, we used to have this discussion about core switches, distribution switches, access switches. Today, we talk about edge, fog, cloud services. So what we're going to see coming more often is not only that E1 is going to be part of a dedicated network, but E1 be integrated to a full solution of data analytics. And that brings a very interesting concept that is originated by Cisco and Rockwell, that is the connected enterprise, where E1 is playing a very important role, and many other guys, like you can see in my banner. So in Total and Hughes, we represent different firms, and something that is critical for the customer is how much it's going to cost me, what exactly I have to pick, and who's going to support all this. That's why ICA and Pride come, and with their expertise, they do the right selection, they do the right support. But it's still, the question is still out there. What is the best way to work with my network? What is the best way to integrate one of the machines that I'm creating as an OEM into a different network, a customer network? So fundamental step one, trying to understand your standards, trying to figure it out what is there. Nothing like an assessment, like a posture survey. We can produce through ICA and everyone else that we work with this kind of effort. This survey is going to show you what you have in your network and what kind of risk and potential risk you will have. So nothing like a good assessment. And beyond that, one more thing, sometimes you have to understand that your device is not going to be alone, or probably your device belongs to a network. What exactly that means? Let's say that you're working with industrial switches. Let's say that you're working with remote devices. We had the discussion about E1. Rockwell is coming much later this year with their own remote access point. But this is very interesting. What about security? What about I'm going to have a remote access to the device, but I want to secure that device? So that's why Rockwell introduced this concept of SIP security, and that brings what is coming next, or what it can complement this SSL VPN tunnel lock that all remote access devices are talking about it. So this is the future. It's something called the transport layer security. And this is the best part. Everybody here is using it already when they do a transaction online with your bank. So imagine this kind of complexity now as a layer of Ethernet IP for connectivity, utilizing your remote access point and securing that channel at the same time. Now, all this is good. And again, this is a story about how much I have to spend and who I need to call. Is open for discussion. But I would put always in perspective this. If you think that you're saving money because you're moving away, because you're creating an air gap, because you have an isolated unit in the corner of your factory, you're not saving money. What you are doing is you're going to expose yourself to a failure that is going to cost you more than the investment that you can do in security. So call any one of these guys here if you have any question about where to start and how much money to invest.
Yeah, something I can add on that, because a lot of a lot of clients I run into will balk at the idea of doing this kind of technology. Usually, it's often like a after the barn door is open kind of situation. You know, they've already been hit or they've already had an issue, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh no, we need cybersecurity protection." If you're running into that where you have a client, or let's say you work someplace and you have, I don't know, a CFO or somebody who's resistant to the idea of doing this kind of investment, one strategy you can use is you can focus on, it's not just for cybersecurity, it's also going to have a positive impact on your bottom line when it comes to service and response time. Because if you can have a faster response time, then you're saving on downtime. So you can ask them, well, let's take an analysis of how much downtime we've had, for example, before response happened. And if we had had something like this, or we could have had somebody remote in and we could have had the problem resolved quickly, how much would that have saved us? So you can not only approach it from a cybersecurity point of view, but you can approach it from just a straight up maintenance point of view on savings. And that's a good way to get this kind of cybersecurity protection through these type of devices into your site.
That's good, Philip. And another thing too, and something that William alluded to when he started talking about, getting data up in the cloud. In addition to just the remote access of an integrator like ICA being able to get in and service your system, there's also the ability for you as a manager of some sort of your equipment and your data, is being able to access your site remotely and being able to understand what's happening in your operations as you travel. I know Dave, for instance, and he can talk about this when I'm done, about things are set up so that they can remotely see what's in their storage tanks. Are there any alarms? And one thing that we may look in the future, and some of our clients have, are notifications, so that there's software that can be set up that you can actually get a notification that there's a problem in the plant. And some software is actually rather sophisticated, that you can actually set up priority where if you have a primary contact, and if that contact does not respond in X amount of time, then it sends to a secondary contact, and if they don't respond, then a tertiary contact, and so forth and so on, to make sure that someone's paying attention to what's going on. And then also what can happen, particularly on off shifts, is that there could be an issue, and maybe the operators, if they weren't paying attention or something got away from them, they may not let management know because they're afraid they're going to get in trouble. But if you have some sort of automatic notification, you're aware of this, and so you'll know. And this also provides a metric to see for your own system, hey, if there's a problem, how quickly do my operators respond? And do we have an administrative issue that we need to solve to make sure that there's better response within the facility itself? Because obviously when you're calling someone like us, presumably you've already tried to diagnose the system, and you tried to fix the problem yourself, and then you've been unable to do that, and now you're reaching out to someone like us to see what we can do. Well, if you have the ability to keep on that, if your supervisors, your managers, and so forth are able to monitor the facility and be aware of the operating state of the plant, and if there are any trouble issues, things that have to be addressed, you can actually kind of find gaps within your own system, and may actually allow you to, maybe if you train people up, or if people become more aware of what's there, because some operators, I know, that just the tools are there and they just don't know how to use them. Maybe this exposes some training issues where you can actually save money. Maybe you don't need to call us. I mean, obviously we like when you do, but maybe you can solve a problem yourself if you were aware about it, or maybe if you were aware about it in time, that you could have done something before the problem became critical. And then I know, even as further as a sales point, to be able to show your clients the fact that, when they want to know that you're reliable and that you're going to be able to provide whatever products or services you provide, when you can show them, hey, we're on top of things. We got our phone, and I can track what's going on, and I know what my uptime is and my efficiency, and I know if something goes down, and we do, we know when we're having maintenance issues. Because all this stuff allows us, when you start tracking your data, you can start building up history of the performance of your equipment, and you can actually start to predict problems. You can start to get ahead of them before they become serious.
I can build on what you just described, Joe. So one of the things that we did in our E1 solution to try to easily step people into that type of thought process is put in some very simple tools to allow you to start thinking within the idea of IIoT. So a lot of people think of IIoT as a big project where you have to start implementing cloud solutions and have a lot of IT training and these kind of things. So what we have implemented in our solution is some easy steps into the very beginning stages of what you might consider IIoT. And one of the things you mentioned was just, you have certain personnel that are not trained or qualified to be in the automation system. They just want to know information about the production line, but they're not trained in the programming tools or how to operate the HMI. So you can put together different views that are separate and don't impact or interfere with the operation of any automation system. And that makes it very easy for someone who just needs to know about the condition and situation, access that information without having to worry about doing anything that might cause other interference. And so we built those kind of tools in, and many of them are very easy to use. We have the ability within some of the E1 products to actually collect data out of a control system, and you can do things like data logging and view that information in charts and trends and things like that. So there's a lot of simple tools that you can access. And then if you evolve and want to get into a more truly built out IoT structure, then there's plenty of companies out there on the market that offer those types of solutions. So we kind of treat ours like a stepping stone to those bigger solutions.
And Dave, do you want to talk about, I know you've got some remote access from your remote monitoring from your site. If you want to, I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit. You're muted.
Yeah, keep doing that. We have a radar. It monitors our tank levels, our fluid levels, and that's for a few reasons: inventory management, safety concerns, high level alarms, disabled pumps, shut off electrical equipment. That's primarily for ground pollution and contamination purposes, and/or an accident or hazard. So those items I can actually monitor. Years ago, we instituted some, still goes along the same line of this conversation and this discussion, is that I can actually see the fluids on my cell phone active live. And what that does, it gives purchasing timely feedback instead of waiting for an email or somebody to give them a call during the day, because we have a very rapid business. It operates like FedEx on a 24-hour basis. We have a pretty rapid environment as far as purchasing material and shipping next day. 78% of my inventory ships the next day. The order's taken that day, and 78% of it ships the next day. So there's no real stocking of material. So with that said, this information on a cell phone, I can actually see a blend being made. If I'm homesick or I'm not in for the day, or I'm in Jersey, such as today, I can actually see formulation and make sure a critical blend is somewhat the chemistry. And we still do chemistry, but I can just do a kind of a stupid check on it, just so I can get a comfort zone. And I know things are done properly that day. Just another example of, how this whole site stuff aids when you're running around in my position, doing other things.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate that. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about is what holds people back from investing. Oh, by the way, I just want to let everybody know, if you want to have any questions, there is a Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen. So if you want to avail yourself of that, and then that'll let us know, because we certainly are going to have some time to take some questions shortly. So a couple of things that hold people back. One, I'd mentioned the big one is that misperception about the security, that they really feel like, that this is creating a new vulnerability. But as I said before, but the fact that it's going, and for the most part, usually going through your existing internet infrastructure, it's not creating any new holes. And again, it's putting up a barrier within your system to protect your system. So that's actually making you more secure, not less secure. The other thing that's nice, the E1 actually has the ability to tie in a hardware switch. So if you want to have that air gap, you have that ability that we can install it in a box and put a little switch on a panel, and then you can literally throw the switch, and that will disable the remote access completely. So this way you can kind of have the best of both worlds, and then only turn it on when you need, so if you weren't doing any remote monitoring where you needed that remote access, you could literally turn it off for security purposes. Or if you had some idea that you're, a denial of service attack was going on and you wanted to then quick cut it off, there is that ability to do that. The other is I think fears on cost. I think that people don't really know what this stuff costs, and a lot of the options are actually very economical. An E1, depending on the options, the base price is slightly under $1,000, and our price, and then or in that in the neighborhood about $1,000, and it can go up a little bit. But there's different options, because we can have Wi-Fi on it. One of the things I didn't talk about is cellular, but if in some cases the plant IT people just won't allow it to be on their IT infrastructure. Or in some cases, like in the case of the water industry, it's just not possible, because you have wells that are well away from any infrastructure, and the only way to connect to them is very cellular. So we've had, in both cases, we've got some water clients that use these to monitor wells remotely, and they have to do this. They have no choice. Because there's no way that they can manage their water without doing this remote monitoring. And we had one client recently where their IT people just refused to allow the system to be, to have the E1 on their infrastructure. So we put in a cellular one, and so we still have the remote capability. And again, that can be disabled, whenever they want. But they quite enjoy it, so they leave it up all the time. And so it really comes down to understanding what your needs are and how things have to be segregated, what you're trying to do. Are you just looking for the capability for remote support, or do you need remote data at all, at certain periods of the day or at all times? And just a matter of building it out. And then if the integrator knows what your long-term goal is, then we can build things out in a way that's the most economical, and we can give you even come up with a plan as to how we're going to roll these things out. And in some cases, like I said, with bring up Pride Chemicals again, what we're doing is right now is we're actually migrating. There have some assets that are not behind the E1. We're actually migrating those assets to be behind the E1 to give full protection, so that their system is more secure than it had been.
Joe, I was going to add a couple comments to what your train of thought there. Was another aspect of this is a little bit more about user management as well. And you mentioned how a key switch can be controlled at the remote site to enable or disable remote access. But whoever owns the account, if they're providing remote access to a third party or an external service, they can also enable and disable the users as well. So you can have create an account for a external user, but then disable that account until it's needed. And so that you have you can control it at both ends. And so it gives you just an extra layer. And the other thing I mentioned briefly earlier was dual factor authentication, especially for external personnel. You can't control who writes down their username and password on a ticket note and leaves it around and makes it available to somebody else who doesn't even have authorization to use that account. But if you use dual factor authentication through a smartphone, text messaging, then you're just taking another layer. And HMS and the E1 solution offers that as a free service built into this system. So I just want to point that out. There's a user aspect to it as well, and we do all we can to make sure that's secure as well.
That's a good point, Trevor. We actually are in that situation. We have a couple contractors that we use part-time. So what we'll do is we have them set up as users, and when we need them, we turn on their access, and when they're not currently working for us, we disable it. So this way that they that they don't have access to things. And also, obviously, if an employee leaves the company, we make sure that that they're removed from access. We don't want people going in and fooling around if they're not supposed to be. One of the things that comes up too is, and this is something probably for either for Trevor or William or both, is what future developments do you foresee coming in the field of remote access or remote monitoring?
That's a good point. Let me just be brief and consistent in this answer. So number one, our devices, all these PLCs, HMIs, drives, everything in between, is going to be connected to devices like this, an access point switch, right? So we have experience. E1 has experience working with these industrial switches. So that will be one of the key elements. The case of having a direct connection to a PLC all the way to deep inside your factory floor, it may be migrating to now we have an OT network, and we want the E1 to be part of this network, at least at the access point, that it would be like a switch like this one, the Stratix industrial switch. Now, something also that is very interesting to keep in mind is what we mentioned about how Ethernet protocols like Ethernet IP is adding layers of security. So as a future development, what we're going to see is something very interesting called next generation firewalls, deep packet inspection. So it's not just to identify the user, but to identify what kind of message someone is sending to the PLC. Case in point, change the firmware. It's very common to see when we do analysis of networks that firewalls are misconfigured or not configured properly for OT devices. Ethernet IP use multiple protocols at the same time. The PLC is one of the noisiest elements in any network. When you have an IT guy analyzing the traffic in one of our networks, they run away. They don't like it. How is that possible that a small device that you call PLC, first of all, the name is strange for them, it can migrate between protocols and it create traffic and it create tendencies. And we go and say to the IT, you know what? Confidentiality probably is not the most important for me, but availability. I want to be sure that this packet, this command is going to be on time and I will have access to the device. Then I have integrity and then I have confidentiality. Anyway, so what is coming next? So one key element will be the SIP layers of security in the common industrial protocol that is under Ethernet IP. Second, your devices are being connected to network, access point, access switches. Then E1 is going to be interacting with them. And also, your services are going to be on demand because the cloud. So you have to establish a series of conditions. And that's why the Connected Enterprise, Cisco, Rockwell guidelines and strategies about how to make better connections is so useful. And all this knowledge is free. You can reach anyone around Rockwell, Toronto, Hughes, of any of the guys here, and you can have access today to the critical information that you need to see if your network conforms with what is coming next, the future.
I have a couple of things to add to that topic as well. When it comes to this security discussion, we tend to think about everything at the network layer and above. But as bad actors get more and more sophisticated, we're trying to stay ahead of that and make sure that the internal workings of our devices are also protected. And it is part of one of our new developments is we are now integrating security chips in our devices. And basically the fundamental purpose of the security chip is to act like a starting point on the boot process of a device. And it keeps track of the secret key that's needed to ensure that everything that happens from that point forward is secure and has not been tampered with. And so they call it a root of trust. And so we're building all of our new products based on that technology. And we just launched our first one. It's a variation of a product we call our E1 Cozy that so when it boots up, it detects if there's been some tampering with the firmware or if it's not the original firmware. So that way, if someone's trying to reverse engineer our stuff and wants to put in something bad like a virus into the firmware, that will be detected and rejected, and the device will not boot.
That's good. That's good. It brings two things. One, what's coming, and also the other question is, what steps should companies take? And I think as far as if they want to get involved in all this stuff, and those actually come hand in hand, because as I said earlier, the way to design, the best way to design a system, the way that's the most cost efficient in the long run, is really you got to know where you're going to figure out how to get there. Because doing things piecemeal, you can do that and you may save money in the short run, but in the long run, you may box yourself into a corner, and then you end up having to make changes, and you end up with like a dead loss. And you don't really want that. You want any asset you buy that's going to be building to the future, not something that's going to be a dead end. I mean, eventually all technology is going to get obsolete and going to be replaced, but this should be built as part of your system life cycle planning. And that's something really that a lot of companies don't really do, is life cycle planning. And when you start from that perspective, all these things shake out, because then you start looking at all the different aspects. So you look at security, you look at remote monitoring, remote access, remote support, you look at future needs in your plant. How often do you turn over equipment? How reliable is my equipment, and how do I maintain it going into the future? So one of the things that's going to be, we feel is going to be a big part of that, the remote monitoring question, is what kind of assets, what kind of data. There's really going to be the big data side. What are you going to do with your data? You have all this data, and how do you turn that into useful information that can help you with your bottom line? And that's going to come out like things like having historians, having MES type solutions where you're looking at your operational efficiency, you're looking at your maintenance history, things like this. These are things where you allow you, one, to make predictive predictions about how your system is going to operate and when it's going to fail, and try to take action before things break, because things never break at an opportune moment. It always happens at the least opportune moment, it seems. So when you build all these things, you actually, as you start to collect information, you collect data, you start building these histories, you start being able to build these predictive models, and you're able to plan for obsolescence and plan for maintenance, as opposed to reacting. Reacting is always going to be more expensive than planning. So those MES solutions, that's one where there's a lot of data that you're going to be pulling up into a cloud and having some sort of solution that's going to manipulate the data and tell you how your operations are going, and tell you why when things don't run, why they're not running, and building up history on that, so you can start tackling the bottlenecks in your system and increase your throughput or reduce your cost, or both. And then, like I said, there's the sales side of being able to show your clients that you're on top of your operations and what you're making. It's the same as when you go to your banker and they want to know what your turnover is and your profitability, and they want that information right away. Well, all this stuff works out of that. The other thing is also the ability to integrate your ERP system in with your automation systems. And this is actually something we're in the early stages right now with Pride Chemicals, is to try to help their workflow. So not just working on the automation assets themselves, but how do we get that information that's in the ERP systems so that it's accessible to the people on the plant floor who need it, and allow them to both get their orders and get the data they need, and also have the systems push back data so that people aren't writing things on paper and then people have to rekey things, and you have mismatches that you have to deal with. So that's another big focus. And so when you start looking at your life cycle and you start looking at that, makes you start looking at what those needs are for today and tomorrow. And then that's the step you take to say, okay, here's what we need to do. How do we set up a plan? How do we implement the plan? And what are our costs? And then you can start budgeting for these things, as opposed to somebody showing up and saying, oh, it's going to be X amount of dollars and getting a sticker shock. You can actually plan these things out and spread the cost out in a way that is comfortable for your budget. But you can only do that if you have that roadmap. Plus the fact that, again, you have to plan for obsolescence, and you have to like we've got a facility that we work with. They've got 100 PLCs. Life cycle on a PLC is 15 to 20 years. If you're not replacing five of them or more a year, there's going to be a really bad day of reckoning one time when a whole bunch of things are going to fail all at once, and you're not going to be ready for it. And this is one aspect of that whole plan.
I want to say this, Joseph, you cover essential and critical elements. I'm not expecting anything less from you with your experience, actually. The case of the installed base evaluation to identify properly the life cycle of a device. You say something that resonates with me all the time. It's not about the quantity of the data, but the quality, how you pack that data. We're asking today to all our networks to generate hundreds of thousands of pieces of information per second. And it doesn't matter if you have all these, if you don't format this properly and you don't share properly on premises, on demand. And so it's not a surprise. And actually you're a visionary in this way, that companies like this one, Rockwell, start a series of acquisitions, investing in the cloud with FactoryTalk Edge gateways. Or you mentioned it before, preventive maintenance with acquisitions of companies like Fix. So there is a lot of things happening, and I think that Joseph make it very clear for us. So don't wait. Don't try to guess that maybe someday something is going to happen, not today. Actually, today you may be under attack and you don't know yet.
Dave, you want to say something?
Oh yeah, just to expand on what Joe was talking about. Basically, there's a couple, another project we got going on between, sales orders being taken by another building. Orders come in, get compiled. The quality requirements get compiled. That data used to go to the warehouse, and they would print out some written documentation, and the orders would get followed, and then the instructions would go out to the automation or the warehouse environment, and everything get manufactured, packaged accordingly. Quality control aspects followed. So now what we did was we integrated on a project this year, part of last year. We integrated directly to the phone call. It goes right out to the automated equipment out in the plant. We eliminated the whole in between. In addition to that, my inventory at the end of the month was always a problem. I always had minuses, large inventory losses, wrong package type. It's all basically, the fat finger theory, of inputting data is what the problem was. Between the warehouse getting back to the production environment, what actually was performed, and to conclude, the final result, we'd lose some information. It was a continuing problem, tried to fix it for years. Now we have that information being input by the operator, directly filling that package, following the instructions. Plus, he's noted, and it's on file, that what he did and what instructions he was told and what did he follow. So that just all helps the throughput of the quality environment and the complete operation of the system. So we're in a phase right now of going through this, still troubleshooting, and we've learned a lot going through the process. It was pretty interesting, actually. It was just an idea concept I had years ago, and now I'm starting to see all the advantages down the road of what we can do with the technology.
Yeah. And then for long term, one of the things that we've talked with Dave about is because they've got multiple facilities, some here in New Jersey, some in New York, and there's so many steps along the way, but having that ability to just really kind of bring all this stuff in, because all these things are available within all this information is, or just should say data is available in the automation system, but it's not coming out as information. And so as we start to move this over, my long-term vision, and then, I've expressed to Dave, is that at some point, when everything is all in there, that literally when he creates a drum of material in the Holtzville facility, and it goes to New Jersey and it gets used in blends over there, that at some point, when all that stuff is there, we can literally have an audit trace of everything that went into a piece of product that went out the door. When was the individual pieces? When did they come in? What lots were they part of? When did they get put into drums? When did they get transported from one facility to the other? When did the material get portioned out into various product runs in New Jersey, so that if somebody gets a drum of final product and say, hey, what's the history of this drum? How did this get to me? If there's an issue, and then we can have a complete assay of everything that happened, the entire history of all the raw materials all the way into that drum, and the entire history of it till it got onto a truck and got shipped off. And that makes it so much easier to be able to diagnose if there are any issues, any quality issues, as to what happened. And so this way it can be prevented for the future. A lot of times, for clients that don't have any kind of history built up, and they call us and they say, oh, the system's not working, and they're kind of vague, and they don't have a historian. And so without that, there's no way to really, it's very difficult to troubleshoot and diagnose a problem if it's not actively happening, if there's no data to go back and look at and to pull over. So so again, as these remote monitoring solutions become more and more important to allow you to again put the data up in the cloud where it's safe. So this way, if you do have a site problem, your data is secure off-site, and you don't have to worry about, well, someone got to my hard drive, the hard drive blew up, or someone, a hacker got in and spiked the system, and now we lost all our data. This having these remote access capabilities insulate you from that. So I think we're going to need to start closing, but so just give everybody, we have a very brief time for closing remarks. Dave, you want to go first?
Oh yeah, it's just been a tremendous, road to this technology we've been working on for a while. We've had some things come up by surprise, and it's bailed us out, and it's become quite an asset. And then we have some other planned events that are a little more challenging, but looking forward to it.
William?
Yes. Remember this. It doesn't matter how many things you can have, the software, the investment, you have to invest in your people. And that's why this event is so important for everyone. So start today, start or focus and concentrate in what you can do to optimize your network and to optimize your remote access and remote monitoring as well.
Trevor?
Yeah, I'd like to echo what William said. Is people is a very important part of this whole solution, and training is required, and it's a big part of our internal security stance to making sure that we are following best practices, and I think that has to also go beyond us and go to the people implementing and working within these security systems.
Philip?
I'm just going to add that this sort of remote access technology, this is one of those situations where it's a case of you should really be proactive and start looking into it now before it kind of walks up and bangs through your door and you're stuck having to look into it after the fact. It's not something you can really avoid. So if you haven't started that process of looking into it, you should really start now.
Yeah. And I'll just finally say again, if you have questions on this, of course, always call ICA Engineering. We can do any and all of these pieces for you. Particularly, like I said, I think the life cycle evaluation is a big part of the whole thing, and then discussing what your needs are and how they fit into that life cycle. So again, thanks for attending. If you're seeing this after the fact, that's great too. Glad you to give us a look, and we will be inviting you to future webinars, and we hope you'll attend then.
Thank you.